It is now my opportunity to share with you some of the recent scholarship in which I've been involved. For nearly 150 years now, historians have argued over whether or not William Brown Ide was ever a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Writing in 1866, Josiah Royce, a professor at Harvard, acknowledged that people called him a Mormon, but then concluded the story was false. For his part, Hubert Howe Bancroft, also writing in 1866, decided it doesn't matter whether he was a Mormon or a Methodist. The silence of his brother biographer and the peculiar manner of his own references to the subject leave some doubt as to the truth. The biographer to whom Bancroft alluded was Ide's own brother Simeon, who surely would have known whether Ide were a Latter-day Saint. While Simeon acknowledged that Ide was a teetotaler and temperance advocate of the straightest sect, wonder who that might be, he never directly mentioned anything about his brother being a Mormon. But since Simeon's biography was published in 1888, at the height of anti-Mormon persecution, it's totally understandable that he would want to paint his brother in the best possible light. Other Ide historians, such as Robert Glass Cleland, writing in 1922, and George Kiroff in 1935, didn't raise the question of his Mormonism one way or the other. While Fred Blackburn Rogers in 1962, Barbara Warner, whose biography of the Bear Flaggers was published in 1996, and our own Dennis Holland, whose lovely book Sierra Saints came out the year after, all argued that Ide was, in fact, a Mormon. But Rogers only provided circumstantial evidence. Warner relied heavily on oral history from Ide descendants, and Holland, understandably, relied heavily on Warner. Definitive proof was still lacking, which helps explain why the most thorough treatment of Ide, in the form of a 1993 Chico State master's degree thesis by Jerry Parker, flat out denied that Ide was ever a Mormon. Without offering a source to back up his conclusion, Parker stated that although Ide was accused of being a secret Mormon, it's now clear he was never a member of the church. Again, with no corroborating attributions, Parker also asserted that Ide always denied the accusation that he was a Mormon. Parker did acknowledge, however, that Ide associated with Latter-day Saints and that some of his family members were probably members. He also agreed that Ide had served as a delegate to the 1844 Illinois State delegation that nominated Joseph Smith as a candidate for the presidency of the United States. But many of those who were in that nominating convention were not LDS. Taking all the evidence together, both pro and con, LDS archivist Michael Landon, who would have liked to have been here today but is attending the Mormon History Association down in San Antonio, concluded in 2010 that while the evidence that William B Ide was a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is compelling, it is not conclusive. When Chico State President Craig Brown authorized me to put together a work party to assist Dave Freeman in cutting and sandblasting the stones you see before you, I took it upon myself to discover the truth of the matter of Ide's Mormonism one way or another. Digging through my files, I discovered a handout I had kept from a 2008 Mormon History Association session in which LDS historian Richard K. Behrens had laid out several facts in support of the argument that Ide was a member of the church. I was dismayed when I was told that Behrens had since passed away, but I thought, what the heck, I'll send him an email anyway. And much to my delight, he let me know, to borrow a phrase from Mark Twain, that the reports of his death were highly exaggerated. Working together, we set out to prove once and for all whether or not Ide was ever a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. After months of research, including a very careful analysis of Ide's own references to Mormonism and several other sources, we concluded that while we had failed to find the elusive smoking gun, the preponderance of admittedly circumstantial evidence was sufficient to conclude that Ide and his family were indeed Mormons. But then, just as I was about to send off our articles on the subject for publication, we found it, the Holy Grail for which we'd been searching. Buried deep in the archives of the Church History Department, we discovered an undated and unsigned letter that was written to some church official, likely Brigham Young. A notation in pencil at the bottom of the letter suggested the author might have been William B Ide. As it turned out, Mike Landon had inspected the letter back in 2009 or so at the behest of Smokey Bassett and Dave Freeman, as they mentioned earlier. It is a small world after all. and he had tried at that time to match the handwriting with known samples of Ide's own writing. But the results were inconclusive, and the letter had been forgotten. But this time around, Landon looked more closely at the letter itself. In that letter, the author noted he had been baptized by one David Nelson in July of 1837. Landon then searched for and found an autobiographical sketch of Nelson in which Nelson mentioned staying with his cousin, William B Ide. The dates matched, the names matched. We had finally found incontrovertible proof of William B Ide's baptism, despite the fact that no contemporary certificate of baptism for either him or any of his family members has ever surfaced. But that's not all. In his letter, Ide included the following intriguing information. When I arose in the assembly of elders today, it was in respondence to a desire that I believed was rightfully within me to serve the church according to the counsel of its order, by the advice, by the order, according to the wisdom, and in the full fellowship of his authorities. Yet I did not expect I should be counseled to go, for the reason that I might do more good, and in the end, by working on the temple this season and becoming more acquainted and better taught, I might do more good afterward. Though of this I wish the church to judge. But after having volunteered, I became more desirous to go, if so I could have the confidence and love of the church. In other words, it appeared to us that Ide had been called on some kind of mission, and that he had reluctantly accepted the call. But what was this assembly of elders, and when did it take place? Rick Behrens and I searched in vain through all the church records we could think of and came up empty. We'd pretty much given up ever discovering what this mysterious mission call was all about, when one morning I woke up with a strong impression that I should look through the Times and Seasons, the Latter-day Saint newspaper that ran from November of 1839 up to the saint's departure from Nauvoo in February of 1846. I just happened to have a facsimile edition of this 6-volume publication in my library. So I walked downstairs in my pajamas, instinctively reached for volume 5, and randomly opened that 383-page volume to a page headed Special Conference. Could this possibly be the assembly of elders to which Ide had alluded? And just as I told myself how unlikely such serendipitous fortune would be, I glanced at the facing page, and there it was. Listed among those called to campaign for Joseph Smith in the state of Vermont on April 6, 1844 was the name William Ide. Was all this just a marvelous coincidence, or was Brother Ide working on me from the other side of the veil? I'd like to think that he was, and that he's the source of my inspiration. Regardless, we now know not only when and by whom William B Ide was baptized, we also know he was called on a mission to promote Joseph Smith's candidacy for the presidency of the United States. It's unlikely he ever began that mission, however. It was only shortly thereafter that Joseph and his brother Hiram were assassinated. And shortly after that, without waiting for Brigham Young and his other fellow Mormons, William B Ide co-led a wagon train to California, arriving at Sutter's Fort on October 25, 1845. I should conclude by informing you that the 28-page scholarly paper that resulted from my months of research is now under peer review by the Journal of the Mormon History Association. It includes numerous additional evidences of Ide's association with the church, including his likely setting apart as president of the Springfield, Illinois branch. When it's finally published, I will contact the good folks at Wikipedia and offer them the definitive proof necessary to change their current wording in the article on Ide, which states, Ide is said to have been a leader in the Mormon community of Nauvoo during his time in Illinois, although the church's authoritative records have no account of his being a member. In the meantime, if you inspect the stonework before me, you'll note that we have included the following quotation from William Baldridge, one of the men who served under Ide in the Bear Flag Revolt. Baldridge had migrated to California from Jackson County, Missouri. He didn't much like Mormons in general, and apparently didn't care for Ide in particular. He likely did not consider his statement as a compliment. But Ide, who had a wonderful appreciation for irony, would doubtless approve of what we have written here, quoting Baldridge. He was a Mormon in religion, and in our judgment was possessed of many visionary, if not utopian, ideas. Thank you.